The wedding was supposed to happen on Saturday night inside the Vitale estate, and every powerful family in the city had been invited to watch Marcello Vitale bury his past. Marcello Vitale, the most feared mafia boss in the city, and the man I had once called my husband, was going to marry Bianca Romeo, the beautiful daughter of a powerful mafia family. Bianca was rich, polished, graceful, and exactly the kind of woman Isabella Vitale had always wanted beside him. Isabella, Marcello's stepmother, and the cold matriarch of the Vitale house, had waited almost 7 years for this wedding. To the guests, it looked like a perfect alliance. To Bianca, it looked like a future. To Isabella, it looked like victory. But to me, Elena Vale, the wife who had disappeared from Marcello's life almost 7 years earlier, it looked like the final closing of a grave that had never held a body. I am Elena Vale, and I am telling you this after everything happened, after the wedding that never became a wedding. After Bianca Romeo removed her veil and walked away, after Isabella Vitale's perfect celebration turned into the night every lie began to bleed, and after my son asked Marcello if he could still be his friend, even after becoming his father. What Marcello said when he saw me again, why he believed I had ended our child, why I disappeared while still carrying his son, and what happened when he walked into his own wedding with the boy he never knew was alive, shocked everyone. To understand how the most feared mafia boss in the city became friends with his own son without knowing it, I have to start with the morning Leo's broken red toy car rolled into Marcello Vitale's path. Leo Vale, my 6.5-year-old son, was old enough to argue that the half mattered. He was young enough to believe a broken toy car needed rest before it could be fixed. And he was innocent enough to think his father was only a question his mother wasn't ready to answer. He didn't know Marcello Vitale was his father. Marcello didn't know the child he had mourned was living only a few miles away from the wedding altar, and I had spent 6.5 years keeping those two worlds apart. I kept telling myself silence was safer than truth, telling myself Marcello would never find us. I kept telling myself a mother could survive being hated as long as her child stayed alive. 3 days before the wedding, Marcello walked into the Children's Therapy Center, where Leo spent 2 mornings a week. He came there to sign a donation paper for his foundation, take a photograph, and leave before the laughter of children could touch the wound he had buried under black suits and colder silence. He didn't come looking for me. He didn't come looking for a child. He didn't know that the little boy sitting in the bright clinic corridor, with one loose shoelace and a red toy car missing half a wheel, was the same child he believed had died before he was born. One of Marcello's guards told Leo to move, but my son looked up from the floor and said he was moving, but his car was not. The guard stepped closer. Leo held the toy car to his chest and frowned like the man had insulted someone helpless. He said she was injured and you do not rush injured things. The whole corridor went silent. Parents stopped whispering. Nurses stopped walking. The clinic director froze with a nervous smile on his face. Everyone knew who Marcello Vitale was. Everyone knew men didn't block his path. Everyone knew children were usually pulled aside before danger noticed them. But Marcello noticed Leo. Instead of ordering him moved, the most feared mafia boss in the city lifted one hand and stopped his guard. Then he did something no one in that corridor expected. He bent one knee, then the other, and Marcello Vitale knelt in front of my son. Leo looked at him like he wasn't a monster, not a boss, not a man the city feared. To Leo, he was only a tall man in a black suit who had finally come down low enough to listen. Marcello asked him his name, and Leo told him about Rocket, the broken red toy car that apparently had feelings, injuries, and rights. When Marcello asked his age, Leo proudly said he was 6.5, and the half was important because nobody was allowed to steal part of his age. Marcello went still. He didn't know why those words hit him. He didn't know why this small boy's age suddenly made the air harder to breathe. He only knew that if the child he believed he had lost had lived, that child would have been almost this age, old enough to talk, old enough to laugh, old enough to sit in a clinic corridor and argue with armed men about a broken toy car. Then Leo pointed at him and said he was hiding a smile. Marcello said he wasn't, but Leo shook his head and told him his face was just bad at practice. By the time I reached the clinic, My son had already given Marcello 3 rules for friendship. Nobody could step on Rocket. Guards couldn't use angry voices with children. And if Leo said smile practice, Marcello had to try. Marcello told him his name, and Leo decided Marcello was too heavy for a friend. So he shortened it to Mark. No one in the Vitale world called him that. Not his men, not his enemies, not even Bianca Romeo, the woman waiting to marry him on Saturday night. But my son said it like he had the right to make a feared man sound human, and Marcello let him. That was what I saw when I walked into the corridor. My little boy was holding Marcello Vitale's hand. The man I had run from was kneeling in front of the child I had run to protect. Leo turned toward me with the happiest smile on his face and said, "Mama, meet Mark. He is my friend." That was the moment Marcello looked up, and the past I had spent almost 7 years hiding found me in the middle of a children's clinic. For 1 second, no one moved. Not the nurses, not the parents, not Marcello's guards, not even Leo, who was still smiling, because he didn't understand why his mother had stopped breathing. Marcello rose slowly from his knees, his hands still near Leo's shoulder. His eyes locked on my face as if he had seen a ghost and hated himself for wanting to touch it. I had imagined this moment too many times in too many nightmares. In some of them, he came with men and guns. In some of them, he came with lawyers and took Leo away from me. In some of them, he didn't speak at all. But I had imagined he would find me like this, with our son smiling between us and calling him friend. "Mama," Leo asked softly, "are you okay?" I forced my hand to move before my fear reached his face. I bent down, picked up the bag I had dropped, and tried to sound like the mother he knew. Calm, warm, safe. I told him I was okay, sweetheart. Leo looked between me and Marcello. He asked if I knew Mark. The question entered the corridor like a blade. I looked at Marcello, and he looked back at me with the same eyes I had once seen over candlelight, over hospital paperwork, over the life we had thought we were building before everything turned dark. But those eyes weren't soft now. They were black with 7 years of pain. "Yes," I said carefully. "I know him." Leo brightened. He said he was nice, that his face was bad, but then it did smile practice. One of Marcello's guards shifted behind him. Marcello didn't look away from me. I saw him take in my plain blue dress, my tired face, the cheap clinic badge hanging from my bag, the absence of jewelry, the absence of his name. Then his gaze moved to Leo again, not with recognition, not yet, but with something sharp and wounded. He saw a child at my side. He saw a child who called me Mama. And because of the lie he had carried for almost 7 years, he saw the cruelest thing a broken man could see. The woman he believed had destroyed his baby standing alive with another child. I told Leo to go to Miss Clara for a minute, keeping my voice gentle. I said I needed to speak to Mr. Vitale. Leo's face folded with confusion, but he said he could call him Mark. I just said for a minute, baby. Miss Clara, Leo's therapist, stepped forward carefully. She was a kind woman with silver glasses and a habit of speaking softly around frightened parents. She reached for Leo's hand, but Leo hesitated and looked back at Marcello. He asked if he wouldn't disappear, right? Marcello's jaw tightened. His voice came out low. No. Leo nodded as if that settled the whole world. Then he walked with Miss Clara toward the therapy room, dragging Rocket against his chest. I waited until the door closed behind him before I let my shoulders drop. I had survived black cars, fake names, unpaid bills, and nights when Leo had a fever and I had no one to call. But standing in front of Marcello again made me feel 18 weeks pregnant and helpless in a clinic bed all over again. Marcello took 1 step closer. He didn't touch me. He knew better, or maybe he hated me too much. "Almost 7 years," he said. My throat tightened. I asked him to please leave. Something cold passed over his face. "Leave," he repeated. "You left first." I looked toward the therapy room door and said, "Not here." He said I didn't get to choose where his grief speaks. Marcello. His name tasted like a wound in my mouth. His eyes flickered at the sound of it, but only for a second. Then he looked past me toward the room where Leo had gone. "That boy," he said. "Is he yours?" Every instinct in my body locked around my son. I asked what it mattered to him. His voice dropped lower. He said he asked me a question. "Yes," I said. "He is my son." Marcello went still in a way that frightened me more than shouting would have. I watched the answer strike him. Not because he understood the truth, but because he understood only the lie. He believed I had been capable of ending our child. Now I was standing in front of him with another one. To him, that must have looked like proof that I had wanted motherhood, just not with him. He looked at me as if the last living part of his heart had been insulted. "So you wanted a child," he said. I closed my eyes for half a second and told him don't. "You wanted to be a mother. Marcello, please. Then why did you destroy mine?" The words hit me so hard I almost stepped back. I had prepared myself for anger. I had prepared myself for accusations. But nothing could have prepared me for hearing him say mine while our son was sitting on the other side of a therapy room door. Alive because I had chosen silence over my own heart. My hands trembled around the strap of my bag. I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to tell him Leo wasn't another child. Leo was his. Leo was the baby he had cried for behind locked doors. Leo was the heartbeat they had told him was gone. But the old fear rose before the words did. The Vitale family didn't lose things quietly. If Marcello knew, Isabella would know. If Isabella knew, Rocco would move. And I hadn't kept Leo alive for 6.5 years just to break at the first sound of his father's pain. I told him I didn't want to talk to him. He said I owed him one answer 7 years ago, and I am still not giving it to you. His face hardened. He said I left him with a dead child in silence. I looked at him then, truly looked at him, and saw what the lie had done. The city feared Marcello Vitale because he had become a man no one could reach, but I knew what he had been before. I knew the man who had pressed his palm to my stomach and whispered to a child who hadn't yet kicked. I knew the man who had ordered a nursery, painted pale green, because he said no child of his would grow up surrounded by black. I knew the man who had waited outside doctor appointments pretending he wasn't nervous. That man had been buried too. "Then keep the silence," I said, my voice breaking despite everything. "It is safer than the truth." Marcello's eyes narrowed. For the first time, anger gave way to suspicion. He asked what that meant. "It means leave us alone." He asked if I thought he would walk away after finding me like this. I told him I thought he was getting married in 3 days. His mouth tightened. "And I think whatever you believe about me," I continued, "whatever you think I did, Leo has nothing to do with it. Do not bring your grief near my son." His eyes darkened at my son, but he didn't miss the way I said it. My son, not our son, not yours. Mine. I hated myself for the word, but I needed the wall it built. Before he could answer, Miss Clara opened the therapy room door, and Leo peeked out. He asked if we were going home. I turned immediately and said, "Yes, sweetheart." Leo came to me still holding Rocket. He looked at Marcello with childlike seriousness and asked if he was coming tomorrow. I froze. Marcello looked down at him. In that moment, I saw his anger collapse under something he didn't understand. Leo wasn't afraid of him. Leo expected him. Leo had already made a place for him in tomorrow. "I don't know," Marcello said. Leo frowned. He told him friends don't say "I don't know." They say "I will try." Marcello's throat moved. "Then I will try." I took Leo's hand before my own tears betrayed me and told him to come on. I walked out of that clinic with my son beside me and Marcello's eyes on my back. I felt them all the way through the lobby, past the desk, through the glass doors, and into the parking lot where sunlight made everything look too normal. Leo talked about Rocket's wheel, about Mark's serious face, about how big men listened better when they kneeled. I nodded at the right places, but my eyes had already found the black sedan parked near the far gate. It didn't belong to Marcello's convoy. The windows were tinted. The engine was running. The driver wasn't looking at his phone, not really. He was looking at us, at me, at Leo. I pulled Leo closer and told him to stay beside me. The sedan moved slowly, as if it had only been waiting for me to notice. It rolled past the front of the clinic, paused long enough for the driver to lift a phone to his ear, then turned out of the lot and disappeared into traffic. My stomach turned cold. For years, fear had been a quiet roommate in my life. That morning it became a hand around my throat. Inside the clinic, Marcello stood near the glass doors, watching the black sedan leave. I didn't know then that he had seen it too. I took Leo home by a different route. I changed buses twice. I walked 4 blocks with him, even though he complained that Rocket was tired and his laces were fighting again. By the time we reached our small apartment above a closed bakery, my hands were numb from holding his. I locked the door, checked the window, checked the hallway, then made Leo soup because normal mothers made soup after therapy. Normal mothers didn't stare through curtains waiting for a car to return. "Did Mark make you sad?" Leo asked at the kitchen table. I nearly dropped the spoon and asked why he would ask that. He said, "My eyes did the thing. The thing when you smile with your mouth, but not the rest." I sat across from him and touched his hair. I told him Mark is someone I knew a long time ago. Leo stirred his soup with unnecessary concentration and asked if he was bad. I thought about the man who had once loved me. I thought about the man who had looked at me in the clinic like I had buried his heart with my own hands. "No," I said quietly. "He wasn't bad." "Then why did you look scared?" "Because the past had found us. Because your father had touched your hand. Because if he asked the right questions, the world I built around you could break before nightfall." I swallowed all of that and said sometimes people from before make grown-ups remember things they don't want to remember. Leo nodded like he understood more than I wanted him to. He asked if he could still be his friend. The question hurt so much I had to look away. I said we would talk about it later. He said later means no. I told him not always, mostly. Despite myself, I smiled. He smiled back, and for a moment the fear softened. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. I flinched before I saw the screen. Unknown number. No message. Just one missed call. I didn't sleep that night. Marcello didn't sleep either. I learned later that after I left the clinic, he stood in the director's office and signed the donation papers without reading a single line. The director thanked him, praised his generosity, and said the foundation support would change many children's lives. Marcello heard none of it. He was still hearing Leo say 6.5. He was still hearing me say it is safer than the truth. He was still seeing the black sedan watching my son. When he returned to his car, his most trusted man, Dante Russo, was waiting beside the open door. Dante Russo had served Marcello for 15 years. First as a driver, then as an advisor, then as the only man Marcello trusted to speak when everyone else stayed silent. He saw Marcello's face and knew something had changed. He asked if he should cancel the afternoon meetings. Marcello didn't answer immediately. He looked back at the clinic and told him to find out everything about Elena Vale. Dante's expression shifted. He knew my name. Everyone close to Marcello knew my name, even if they rarely dared to say it. "Everything," he asked. Marcello said where she lived, who helped her, where she works, who the boy is, when he was born, who his father is. Everything. Dante hesitated only once. He asked what if the boy is nothing. Marcello's jaw tightened. He said, "Then I will know I was a fool for one morning. And if he is something?" Marcello looked at him then. And the coldness in his eyes wasn't the coldness of a mafia boss. It was the terror of a man standing at the edge of a truth he wanted and feared in equal measure. "Then someone lied to me," Marcello said, "and I want to know who before Saturday." By morning, Dante had the first pieces. I lived under my maiden name. I paid cash when I could. I worked part-time at a small design office and part-time from home stitching alterations for women who paid late and complained early. Leo's birth certificate listed me as the mother. The father's line was blank. His birthday was 5 months after the night Marcello had been told our pregnancy was gone. 5 months. That was the number that changed everything. Dante placed the file on Marcello's desk before sunrise. Marcello sat behind the black wood table in his study, the same room where Isabella had once brought him a divorce packet with my name on it. The estate outside was already preparing for the wedding. Trucks arrived with flowers. Staff carried boxes through halls. Bianca's family sent wine, silk runners, and a list of last-minute guest changes. Somewhere in that house, Isabella was building the celebration she believed would end my memory forever. Marcello opened the file. Leo Vale. Born 5 months after Elena Vale disappeared. No father listed. No known male guardian. Multiple addresses in 6 years. Medical bills paid in cash. School emergency contact Elena Vale only. Therapy center notes stated the child asks about father, but mother requests staff not discuss paternal history. Observant, verbal, anxious during unexpected pickups, attached strongly to mother. Marcello stared at the page until the words blurred. 6.5, 5 months. No father. Elena's silence. Truth is safer than silence. No, it is safer than the truth. He stood so suddenly, his chair struck the wall behind him. Dante didn't move. Where is she now? Marcello asked. Apartment above a bakery on East Mercer. She drops the boy at school at 8 o'clock. Marcello grabbed his coat. Dante stepped in front of him. It was a dangerous thing to do, but Dante had survived by knowing when to risk his life for the right reason. He said, "You cannot go there with anger." Marcello's eyes cut to him. Dante held his ground. He said, "If that boy is yours, then the first thing he sees cannot be you breaking his mother." Marcello looked away. The words struck because they were true. For almost 7 years he had imagined what he would say if he saw me again. None of those imagined conversations had included a child, a toy car, or the possibility that his grief had been built on a lie. When I opened my apartment door that morning, Marcello was standing in the narrow hallway alone. No guards visible, no raised voice, no weapon in his hand, but he looked more dangerous than he had in the clinic, because now he wasn't guessing blindly. He had numbers in his eyes. I tried to close the door. His hand caught it before it shut. "Leo was born 5 months after you disappeared," he said. My heart stopped. I told him to move his hand. He said I was still pregnant when I left. "Marcello, not here. Tell me I am wrong." Behind me, I heard Leo in the kitchen humming to himself over cereal. I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door almost closed behind me. "Please don't." His face changed. The plea answered more than denial would have. "Is he my son?" he asked. I looked down the hallway at the peeling paint, at the old carpet, at the little life I had built because I had no choice. For 6.5 years, I had held this truth in my mouth until it became part of my bones. I had lied to landlords, doctors, teachers, neighbors, my son, and myself. But I had never stood in front of Marcello directly to his face about Leo. Maybe some part of me had been waiting for the day I would finally fail. "He is mine," I whispered. "I know he is yours." Marcello's voice shook for the first time. "I am asking if he is mine, too." The hallway seemed to tilt. "Yes," I said. Marcello didn't move. He didn't breathe. The most feared man in the city stood outside my door like a man who had just been stabbed in a place no one could see. "Yes," he repeated. I nodded once, because if I spoke again, I would break. His hand fell from the door frame. "You let me believe he was dead." "No. You hid my son from me." "I hid him from the people who tried to make sure he never lived." His eyes sharpened. He asked what I was talking about. I shook my head and told him he needed to leave. "Elena." "No. You found him once by accident. Do not make me run again." Something in his face cracked. He asked if I thought he would take him from me. I said I thought his family tried once before he was even born. He stared at me, and I saw the exact moment his anger began to turn. Not disappear, never disappear, but turn toward the shape of a truth he hadn't allowed himself to imagine. "Tell me," he said. "I can't. You can. If I tell you, they will know I told you." "Who?" I closed my eyes. "Isabella," he asked. I didn't answer. "Rocco." My silence did answer. Marcello stepped back as if the hallway had become too small for him. For years, Isabella had been the voice beside his grief, the stepmother who told him I was selfish, the woman who urged him to move on, the woman arranging his wedding to Bianca in 3 days. Rocco had been the uncle who handled files, clinics, papers, lawyers, problems. I saw the names enter Marcello's mind and refused to leave. The apartment door opened a little wider behind me, and Leo peeked out with cereal milk on his upper lip. He asked if Mark was here. I turned quickly and told him to go inside, sweetheart. Leo looked at Marcello. His face brightened. He said, "You came back." Marcello's expression changed so painfully I almost looked away. He lowered himself slightly, not fully kneeling this time, but enough that Leo didn't have to look too far up. He said he told him he would try. Leo nodded. "Good, because friends don't disappear." "No," Marcello said softly. "They don't." Leo smiled and went back inside when I asked him to, but the damage had been done. Marcello had heard his son welcome him back. He had seen how easily Leo trusted him. He had felt the life that had been kept from him brush past his hands and disappear into a kitchen with chipped tiles. I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. I told him he couldn't tell him. Marcello's eyes returned to mine. He said he wouldn't break him. I told him he didn't know what his world does to children. He said he knew what it did to his. The words fell between us. Then I told him only what I could bear to say. Not everything. Not the full night. Not the forged divorce. Not the audio. Not yet. I told him that the clinic emergency hadn't been what he thought. I told him that I had never signed what they showed him. I told him I had woken up and been told the baby survived. I told him someone from his family had warned me that if I came back, the next report wouldn't be fake. I didn't explain every detail. I couldn't. Some memories still had teeth. But I gave him enough to make the floor vanish under him. Marcello listened without interrupting. His face didn't change much, but his eyes did. The hatred that had lived there for years began to lose its place. Under it was something worse. Guilt. I came to that clinic, he said. They told me you had signed. I signed something because they told me the baby needed help. They showed me video. They showed you what they wanted you to see. They told me you refused to see me. I asked for you until they put me under. His throat moved. He turned away and placed one hand against the hallway wall. For a moment, I thought he might break it. Instead, he lowered his head. Inside the apartment, Leo laughed at something on the small television. Marcello closed his eyes. He told me he hated me. I know. He said he hated me because they told him I killed him. I know. His voice became rough, and he was eating cereal behind this door. I pressed my hand over my mouth because the truth sounded unbearable when he said it. Before either of us could speak again, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out with shaking hands. Unknown number again. This time there was a message. Stay away from Marcello Vitale, or your son won't make it to his 7th birthday. I stared at the words until they blurred. Marcello noticed my face and asked what it was. I tried to hide the phone, but he took one step closer, not touching me, not forcing me, only looking. My hand trembled too badly to lie. I turned the screen toward him. He read the message. The hallway went colder. For the first time since I had known him, Marcello Vitale didn't look like a man trapped between grief and love. He looked like the Mafia boss the city feared. Pack a bag, he said. No. Elena, no. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The second you came near us, they saw. They were already watching you. I remembered the black sedan and felt sick. Marcello's voice lowered. Listen to me carefully. I will not take Leo from you. I will not tell him anything before you agree. I will not drag him into my house like a trophy. But from this moment on, no one touches either of you without going through me. You don't understand, I whispered. That is what they want. If Leo becomes yours, he becomes theirs. Marcello looked at the closed door behind which our son was humming. Then he looked back at me, and something ancient and brutal settled into his face. No, he said. He becomes mine to protect, not theirs to own. I wanted to believe him. God help me. Some part of me had never stopped wanting to believe him. But believing Marcello had once cost me everything except my child, and now my child was the only thing I had left. I stepped back toward the door. I kept him alive without you, I said. His eyes softened, and that hurt more than his anger. I know, he said, and now they know he is alive, too. The phone buzzed again before I could answer. Another message appeared. Run again if you want. We found you once. We can find the boy anywhere. Leo called from inside saying his cereal got soggy. I looked at Marcello. He looked at the phone. And in that narrow hallway above an old bakery, with our son waiting behind a thin wooden door, and his wedding 3 days away, the past stopped being a secret. It became a threat. It became a threat. For 6.5 years, I had lived with fear like a locked door inside my chest. I knew how to sleep lightly, how to change routes, how to memorize exits, how to smile at teachers while wondering whether the man across the street was watching my son. But fear was different when Marcello was standing beside me. It didn't feel smaller. It felt louder because now the danger had a name, a past, and a family powerful enough to make lies look legal. Marcello read the second message twice, then lifted his eyes to mine. They found you before I did. I hated that he was right. I hated that the black car outside the clinic hadn't been my imagination. I hated that Leo was inside the apartment worrying about soggy cereal while men who had once turned my pregnancy into a funeral were now threatening his 7th birthday. I told him I needed to get him away from here. Yes, Marcello said, but not by running blind. I have been running blind for years, and that is over. The old part of me wanted to slap him for saying it like a command. The weaker part wanted to fall into his chest and believe him. I did neither. I opened my apartment door just enough to look at Leo. He was standing on a chair at the sink, trying to pour his soggy cereal into the garbage with the serious focus of a surgeon. His pajama shirt was twisted at one shoulder. His hair was messy. His little red car, Rocket, sat on the counter like a patient waiting for treatment. He looked so normal that it hurt. Leo, I said, keeping my voice steady, pack your school bag. He looked over his shoulder. and asked if we were going somewhere. I said for a little while. He asked if Mark was coming. I felt Marcello go still beside me. It was such a small question, but it carried everything. Leo had known Marcello for less than a day, and already he had placed him in the category of people who might come, people who might stay, people who matter. Marcello stepped into the doorway slowly, carefully, as if the apartment belonged to a frightened animal, and he didn't want to make it run. "I am coming," he said. Leo studied him. He said he looked extra serious again. Marcello's mouth moved, not quite a smile. He said he was working on it. "Good," Leo said, "because practice means you don't quit." Marcello looked at me then, and the words hit both of us in different places. I packed Leo's things with shaking hands. 2 shirts, 1 sweater, his toothbrush, his school notebook, the blue dinosaur socks he refused to sleep without, and Rocket, because Leo said cars also needed emotional support when houses changed. Marcello didn't rush me. He stood near the door, speaking quietly into his phone, giving orders I couldn't fully hear. No sirens, no shouting, no men bursting up the stairs with guns in their hands. Just quiet movement below the window. Cars repositioning, shadows becoming protection. When we stepped outside, the street looked almost ordinary. A woman carried groceries. A bus sighed at the corner. Somewhere a dog barked, but Marcello's men were there now, dressed like strangers, standing like walls. Leo noticed immediately. He asked Marcello if those were his friends, too. Marcello glanced at the men, then back at Leo. Something like that. Leo leaned closer to me and whispered loudly that they needed smile practice, too. For 1 second, through fear and danger and 7 years of grief, I almost laughed. Marcello heard it. His eyes softened, and I hated him for still being able to reach me with silence. He didn't take us to the Vitale estate. I wouldn't have gone, and maybe he knew that. Instead, he took us to a small private house on the edge of the city. A place hidden behind iron gates and old trees, with cream walls, bright windows, and no family portraits watching from the halls. He told me it belonged to no one in the Vitale family. It was held under a company name only Dante Russo knew. Dante was the trusted man who had served Marcello for 15 years, and when he opened the door for us, his eyes moved to Leo with a kind of careful respect that made me trust him more than I wanted to. "There are 2 bedrooms upstairs," Dante said. "Kitchen is stocked. No staff inside unless you ask." "I am not a prisoner," I said. Marcello turned to me. "No, then don't put guards on every door like I am one. They are not there to keep you in. They are there to keep them out." "Them," I repeated. He didn't answer, and that was answer enough. That night, Leo fell asleep in the upstairs bedroom, after making Marcello promise Rocket wouldn't be inspected by serious adults. I sat beside the bed until his breathing slowed, until his fingers loosened around the blanket, until I could almost convince myself that the world hadn't split open again. When I came downstairs, Marcello was standing in the living room with a folder in his hand. Dante stood near the fireplace, his face grim. Marcello looked at me and said, "There is something else." I had no strength left for something else. "What?" He opened the folder and placed a page on the table. "The divorce." I stared at him. "What divorce?" His face changed at my answer. Whatever he had expected, it wasn't that. "The one you filed 3 months after you disappeared. I never filed for divorce." Silence filled the room. Dante looked down. Marcello's hand tightened on the back of the chair. "Isabella brought me a packet," he said. "Your signature, a letter, a request to be free of the Vitale name." My stomach turned. I never signed anything. I signed a non-contest acknowledgement because they told me you wanted it finished quietly. You signed. The word came out broken. His eyes closed for half a second. "I thought you had already left me in every way that mattered." I looked at the paper. There was my name at the bottom, curved and delicate, close enough to my real signature that someone who loved me and hated me at the same time might believe it. Elena Vitale. A fake letter beside it said I wanted no contact, no property, no claim, no memory. It said there was no living child from the marriage. That line made me sit down before my knees failed. "No living child," I whispered. Marcello's voice was rough. "They erased you twice. Once for my child, once for my name." I covered my mouth with my hand. For years I had believed Marcello had let me go because he hated me. He had believed I had asked to be freed because I had no shame. We had been standing on opposite sides of the same locked door, both bleeding, both thinking the other had turned away first. Dante placed another document on the table. The decree was pushed through by a judge connected to Rocco. Service records are false. Notice was never delivered to Mrs. Vitale. The notary stamp on her filing appears forged. Legally, once fraud is proven, the decree collapses. I looked up slowly. So, what am I? Marcello looked at me then with a pain so bare it was almost unbearable. My wife, he said. If you still hate the word, I deserve that. But on paper and truth before God, you were never the one who left our marriage. They dragged you out of it and made me sign grief. I wanted to answer. I wanted to tell him I didn't hate the word. I hated how much I had missed it. But from upstairs, Leo called softly. Mama. I stood immediately. Marcello stepped back to let me pass. He didn't follow me. That restraint did more damage than force would have, because I remembered a time when Marcello had known exactly when to come closer and when to let me breathe. I found Leo sitting up in bed, eyes half open. Did the house change again? He mumbled. No, baby. Is Mark downstairs? Yes. He didn't disappear. No. Leo lay back down satisfied. Good. Tell him tomorrow is still smile practice. I brushed his hair back and said I will. When I returned downstairs, Marcello was alone. Dante had gone. The fake divorce papers were still on the table between us, like a dead thing dug out of the ground. Leo asked if you disappeared, I said. Marcello swallowed and asked what I told him. That you didn't. He nodded once, but his eyes shone, not with tears. Marcello Vitale didn't cry easily, but something in him was close to it. I don't know how to do this, he said. Do what? Stand near him without telling him. Look at him without reaching for years I don't deserve. Hear him call me Mark when every part of me wants to hear father and knows I haven't earned it. I looked toward the stairs. He is a child, Marcello, not a confession booth. I know. He cannot carry our pain. I know. And if we tell him gently together. Not because you are angry. Not because Isabella forced our hand. Not because you need him to fix what they broke in you. His face softened at my words. Together, he said. The next morning, Marcello made pancakes badly. It was such a strange, impossible thing that for several minutes I simply stood in the kitchen doorway and watched the most feared mafia boss in the city burn one side of a pancake while my son instructed him like a tiny, disappointed chef. Leo wore dinosaur socks and had flour on his cheek. Marcello stood in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking more helpless in front of a frying pan than he had ever looked in front of armed men. You flipped too early, Leo told him. Marcello stared at the smoking pancake. That means it was angry, not ready. I pressed my lips together. Marcello looked over his shoulder and caught me almost smiling. For one heartbeat, the kitchen became a ghost of the life we might have had. A child at the counter, morning light, his hands busy with something harmless. My body remembering a happiness my mind had forbidden. Then Dante entered the doorway, and the ghost vanished. Marcello saw his face and set the spatula down. What? Dante glanced at Leo. Marcello's voice changed. Outside, I stiffened. No, if this concerns Leo, I hear it. Marcello looked at me, then nodded. Dante stepped closer and lowered his voice anyway. The black sedan from the clinic was traced to one of Rocco's shell drivers. We also found a second car near Leo's school this morning. They left when our men arrived. The kitchen went silent. Leo looked up from the flour on his fingers. Is someone taking my school spot? My heart twisted. Marcello crouched beside him. No. Then why does Mama look scared? Marcello looked at me, then back at Leo. Because grown-ups sometimes make problems bigger than they need to be. Leo considered this, then make it smaller. Marcello's mouth tightened. I will. I didn't send Leo to school that morning. Marcello wanted to keep him inside the safe house, but Leo had a therapy session in the afternoon, and staying hidden would only frighten him more. We argued quietly in the hallway while Leo rebuilt Rocket on the kitchen floor. They threatened his birthday, Marcello said, and if I lock him in a strange house with guards outside, he will know something is wrong. He should know enough to be careful. He is 6.5. He is my son. The words stopped both of us. Marcello looked away first. I am sorry. I folded my arms tightly. No, don't apologize for the truth. Just don't use it like a weapon. He nodded. Then we take him to therapy with protection he cannot see. I hated that I agreed. The attempt happened at 3:16 in the afternoon. Later, people would tell this as if it had been a clean, controlled rescue. It wasn't. It was 27 seconds of pure terror. Leo's therapy center had a side exit used for children whose parents wanted to avoid the crowded front corridor. Miss Clara was walking Leo toward that exit because I was waiting in the car under Marcello's instructions. Marcello had been called to take an urgent message from Dante outside the building. His men were close, but close is not the same as holding your child's hand. Leo saw the black sedan first. He told me afterward that he recognized it because bad cars move slowly even when they pretend they are not looking. It was too mature and too childish at the same time, and I hated that my son had learned to notice danger before he learned multiplication. The sedan stopped near the side entrance. A man stepped out with a clipboard and a fake clinic badge. He smiled at Miss Clara and said, "Mrs. Vale asked us to bring Leo around front. There is an issue with her car." Miss Clara hesitated. That hesitation saved my son. Leo looked at the man's badge. Then he looked at the sedan. Then he remembered the friend rules he had made in a clinic corridor 2 days earlier. Guards cannot use angry voices with children. This man's voice was soft, too soft, but his eyes were angry. Leo took one step back. "I need my mama." The man should for him. Miss Clara grabbed Leo's shoulder and pulled him behind her. "Sir, you need to check in at the front desk." The man's smile vanished. The back door of the sedan opened. I saw it from the car. There are sounds a mother never forgets. A plate breaking in another room. A child coughing in the middle of the night. A small voice saying your name with fear in it. Leo shouted, "Mama." And the world became nothing but distance. I ran. Marcello moved faster. He came from the side of the building like something released from a cage. One of his men slammed the sedan door before the second man could step out. Dante caught the man with the clipboard by the wrist and twisted him away from Leo. Miss Clara pulled Leo back so hard they both nearly fell. I reached my son and dropped to the pavement around him, my arms closing overhead, his shoulders, his shaking little body. "I saw the car," Leo kept saying. "Mama, I saw the car." I told Miss Clara I did good, right? "I did good. You did good," I said, kissing his hair, his forehead, anywhere I could reach. "You did so good, my brave boy, my smart boy." Marcello stood a few feet away, holding the man by the front of his jacket. His face was no longer the face Leo had called bad at smiling. It was the face of Don Vitale, the man the city feared for a reason. "Who sent you?" Marcello asked. The man said nothing. Marcello looked at Dante. "Take him." I knew what those words could mean in Marcello's world, and I looked up sharply. "No." Marcello's eyes found mine. "Not in front of Leo," I said. Something human came back into his face. He released the man to Dante without another word. His men moved quickly, quietly, blocking Leo's view as they pushed the attackers into another car. No gunfire, no blood on the pavement, no screaming except the sound still trapped in my chest. Leo reached one hand toward Marcello. Marcello froze. Then he crossed the distance and knelt in front of us, careful, slow, as if he didn't deserve to touch what he had almost lost twice. Leo looked at him with wet eyes. "You came." Marcello's voice broke. "Yes, fast." Leo sniffed. "Good, because I was very busy being brave." Marcello let out a sound that was almost a laugh and almost pain. "You were." Leo leaned forward and put his small arms around Marcello's neck. I watched Marcello close his eyes. I watched his hand lift, hesitate, then settle gently against our son's back. Something inside me gave way. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first crack in the wall I had built out of fear. That night, Marcello didn't ask whether I still planned to run. He already knew the answer had changed. Leo slept between me and the edge of the bed in the safe house. Rocket tucked under his chin, and Marcello's jacket folded at the end of his bed because he said it smelled like outside and serious. Marcello stayed outside the bedroom door for hours, sitting in a chair like a guard who had finally understood what he was guarding. Around midnight, I stepped into the hallway. "You should sleep," I said. "So should you." I tried. So did I. We stood there in the quiet, both listening to Leo breathe. "They tried to take him because of me," Marcello said. "They tried to take him because of them. Same blood." "No," I said. "Not the same." He looked at me. I wrapped my arms around myself. "You came for him." His face changed, but he said nothing. "Tomorrow is your wedding," I said. "There will be no wedding. You can cancel it quietly." "No." "Marcello, they erased you quietly. They forged your name quietly. They made me mourn my son quietly. They let you raise him in fear quietly." His eyes darkened. "I will not end this quietly." I looked toward Leo's door. He is not a weapon for your revenge. No, Marcello said. He is the reason I will not turn revenge into a war. That silenced me. Marcello stepped closer, still leaving space between us. I want you there tomorrow. I shook my head. I will not let them turn Leo into a scandal. He will not be the scandal. He will be the truth. Truth can still hurt a child. Then we protect him while we speak it. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to say I had spent years surviving by avoiding rooms full of people like Isabella, and I would not walk back into one willingly. But then I remembered Leo on the pavement, asking if he had done good because he had noticed the car. Running hadn't kept him safe anymore. Silence had become a door they could open whenever they wanted. I ran once to save him, I said. I won't run again while he watches. Marcello lowered his head like those words were a vow. The wedding day arrived bright and merciless. By noon, the Vitale estate looked like a palace dressed for a lie. White roses climbed the gates. Gold chairs lined the grand hall. Crystal chandeliers burned above polished marble. Guards stood at every entrance. But this time some answered to Marcello alone. Guests arrived in black cars and silk dresses. Old Mafia leaders with daughters in diamonds. Men who had once whispered about my disappearance. Women who had pitied Bianca for marrying a man with a dead heart and envied her for getting the Vitale name anyway. Bianca Romeo stood in a private room upstairs, wearing a gown so perfect it looked untouched by life. She was beautiful but not cruel. That mattered. She had accepted an alliance, not a love story. She had been told Marcello was free, that his first wife had destroyed his child and disappeared, that the past was ugly but finished. I wondered what it felt like to stand dressed as a bride inside someone else's unfinished wound. Isabella moved through the estate like a queen before a coronation. She wore silver, not white, but she shone brighter than the flowers. Rocco stood beside her, whispering into phones, checking doors, controlling staff, still believing control meant safety. Neither of them knew the men who had tried to take Leo had already talked, not because Marcello tortured them in some dark room. Because Dante had found the money trail, the messages, the orders, and the fear beneath their loyalty. At 6 o'clock, Marcello stood at the altar. He wore black. No flower on his lapel, no smile, no softness. To the guests, he looked like a man ready to marry duty. To me, standing behind the closed doors of the hall with Leo's hand in mine, he looked like a man standing at the edge of a grave with a shovel in his hand. Leo looked up at me. He wore a small navy suit Marcello had sent, but I had chosen. No Vitale crest, no family pin. Just my son, nervous and brave. Are we late? He whispered. No. Is Mark inside? Yes. Is he getting married? I knelt in front of him and touched his cheek. We had told him only enough that morning. That Marcello was someone important from before. That people had lied. That today we were going to help tell the truth. Not the full truth of father yet. Not before the room. Not before the noise. He trusted me, but I could see questions gathering in his eyes. Not anymore, I said. The doors opened. The hall turned. The first sound wasn't a gasp. It was the sudden absence of music. I walked in holding Leo's hand. Whispers broke like glass. Elena. Is that her? She was gone. The child. Isabella's face lost color so quickly that for one savage second, I understood why she had feared this moment. I wasn't supposed to walk back into that house. I was supposed to remain a story she controlled. A shameful name spoken in low voices. A woman who had vanished conveniently before Bianca could rise. But I was there, alive, walking, holding the boy she had tried to erase before he had a name. Bianca stood at the front of the hall, veil over her face, still as a statue. Marcello turned from the altar. He didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. The officiant stammered Don Vitale. Marcello lifted one hand and the room obeyed. There will be no wedding today, he said. A murmur swept through the hall. Isabella moved first. Marcello, she said sharply, though her smile tried to stay in place. Do not humiliate this family. Marcello looked at her. You humiliated this family when you forged my wife's divorce, buried my living child on paper, and dressed another woman in white to replace the mother you failed to erase. The room exploded into whispers. Bianca's hand rose slowly to her veil. Rocco stepped forward. Elena has manipulated. Be quiet, Marcello said. 2 words, not shouted, not dramatic, but Rocco stopped. Marcello walked down the steps from the altar and came toward us. He didn't take Leo from my hand. He didn't pull me into some public claim. He knelt in front of Leo, just as he had in the clinic, just as he had in the hall. "Little lion," he said softly. "None of this is because you did something wrong." Leo looked at me, then at him. "Okay." Then Marcello stood and faced the room. "This is Elena Vitale," he said. "My wife. The woman many of you were told abandoned me after ending our child." My lungs tightened. Marcello's voice didn't break, but it carried something heavier than rage. "That story was a lie." Isabella shook her head. "Marcello, stop." "No, you stopped my life for almost 7 years. Now you will listen." Dante moved to the side of the hall, a screen lowered behind the altar. The same screen that had been prepared to show childhood photographs of Bianca and Marcello for the wedding guests. Instead, it lit with documents. Marcello didn't drown the room in details. He gave them enough to make denial impossible. Elena was taken to a private clinic while pregnant with my child. I was sent away for a fake emergency. A consent form was forged. A medical report was falsified. A clinic video was edited. I was told the pregnancy was terminated by her choice. She was told that if she came back to me, our child wouldn't survive the next attempt. Guests stared at the screen as the forged signature appeared beside the real one. Then the clinic timestamp. Then the original hallway footage showing Elena being rushed through doors barely conscious. Then the fake divorce filing with a notary stamp Dante had already proven false. Marcello continued. Months later, I was shown a divorce request Elena never signed. I signed a non-contest paper because I believed the woman I loved had already destroyed everything between us. That document was used to create a false decree. And this wedding was arranged on top of that fraud. Bianca removed her veil. The gesture was small, but the room felt it. She looked at Isabella, then at Rocco, then at Marcello. Her voice was quiet but clear. "You were never trying to give me a husband. You were trying to bury his wife." Isabella's eyes flashed. "Bianca, do not be foolish." Bianca stepped back from the altar. "No, I was foolish when I believed this was an alliance, not a cover-up." For the first time, Isabella looked truly alone. Rocco made one desperate move. The boy could be anyone's child. Marcello turned to him slowly. "Say that again." Rocco's mouth closed. Dante lifted another document. Paternity was confirmed this morning through medical comparison from Leo's existing records and Don Vitale's verified sample. I looked at Marcello sharply. He held my gaze for a second, apologizing without words. He hadn't tested Leo behind my back with force. Dante had used records already taken from Marcello's side and a medical marker from Leo's old emergency file. Enough to support what the timeline had already proved. I still hated the invasion. I also understood why he needed something Isabella couldn't twist. Marcello looked back at the room. "Leo is my son." The words landed everywhere. Leo's hand tightened around mine. Marcello's voice changed then. It became lower, more dangerous, but not wild. "You did all of this because you wanted Elena gone before she became impossible to replace. You wanted Bianca beside me. You wanted my son erased before he could become the reason Elena stayed." Isabella's mask finally cracked. "I protected this family." "No," Marcello said. "You protected your control. She was nothing." The room went silent. Marcello stepped closer to her. "She was my wife. She would have ruined you. She saved my son." Isabella's eyes flicked toward Leo, and I moved instinctively in front of him. Marcello saw it. Everyone saw it. Then he said the line that ended her reign. "You thought a wife could be replaced. You forgot the mother of my child couldn't be erased." No one defended her after that. Rocco was removed by Marcello's men before he reached the side door. The doctor's confession, the driver's payment records, the forged divorce trail. All of it went from wedding evidence to legal fire by midnight. But I barely saw the room after Marcello spoke. I only saw Leo looking up at me with too many questions for a 6.5-year-old heart. We didn't tell him in front of them. Marcello understood that without me saying it. He ended the spectacle quickly. He didn't force me to stand beside him like a restored trophy. He didn't ask me to forgive him under chandeliers. He didn't kiss me for the crowd. He only walked us out through a side garden while the wedding guests drowned behind us in the truth. The garden was quiet. White roses climbed the stone wall. Somewhere inside, Isabella's perfect night was collapsing piece by piece. Outside, my son stood between me and Marcello, still holding Rocket, because he had insisted she needed to see the flowers. Leo looked at Marcello. "Why did you say I am your son?" The question was small, The answer wasn't. Marcello looked at me first. I nodded, though my heart trembled. He knelt in front of Leo, just as he had in the clinic, just as he had in the hall. Maybe that was how their story would always begin again, with the most feared man in the city lowering himself until a child didn't have to look too far. "Because it is true," Marcello said. "I was your father before I knew your name." Leo looked at me. "Mama, did you know?" Tears burned my eyes. "Yes, baby, I knew. Why didn't you tell me?" I crouched beside him. "Because I was scared." Leo's lip trembled. "Were you scared of Mark?" I looked at Marcello, then back at my son. "No, I was scared of the people around him." Marcello's voice was quiet, and she was right to be scared. Leo processed this with the serious effort of a child trying to understand adult pain without letting go of his toy car. "So Mark is my papa. If you want him to be," I said. Marcello's eyes closed for a second. Leo turned to him. "Are you still my friend?" Marcello's face broke in a way I had never seen. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough for me to see the man under the boss, the father under the grief. "Only if you still want me to be," he said. Leo stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Marcello's neck. "You can be papa too," he whispered. "But friend rule still stays." Marcello held him carefully, like a man holding a miracle he was afraid to wake. "Always," he said. I looked away because I couldn't watch without breaking. Later, after Leo fell asleep in the safe house, with Rocket under one arm, and Marcello's jacket folded at the end of his bed, because he said it smelled like outside and serious. Marcello and I stood on the balcony in the dark. The city glittered below us, like it hadn't spent the day tearing open old wounds. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "I don't know how to trust you again," I said finally. "I know. I loved you even when I ran from you." That was the worst part. Marcello's hand tightened around the railing. "I hated you because it was easier than admitting I had failed you. You believed them. Yes, you didn't come for me." His voice was raw. "I thought you didn't want to be found. I wanted you every day." He closed his eyes. "But I wanted Leo alive more," I said. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet. "I will spend the rest of my life understanding that." I looked toward the room where our son slept. "He cannot become a Vitale weapon. He won't. They will call him heir. Not while I breathe. They will try to shape him. Then they will lose their hands before they touch his childhood." I turned sharply. Marcello softened, not literally. "I am learning." Despite everything, a small laugh escaped me. It hurt, but it was real. He looked at me like that laugh had given him something he didn't deserve. "Leo will inherit my love before he inherits my name. He will be a child first, not an heir, not a symbol, not a trophy." I believed he meant it. That wasn't the same as trusting him, but it was the first stone in a bridge I had thought would never exist. The next morning, Leo asked if fathers were allowed at therapy. I said yes. He asked if papas had to follow friend rules. Marcello said yes. He asked if smile practice would be every day. Marcello looked at me before answering. Every day. A week later, we returned to the Children's Therapy Center. Not because everything was healed, not because the city had stopped whispering, not because the Vitale name had suddenly become safe. We returned because Leo had an appointment, because Rocket needed to show Miss Clara her repaired wheel, and because normal life had to be built one ordinary morning at a time. The corridor looked the same as the first day. Bright walls, small chairs, cartoon stickers on the glass, parents pretending not to stare as Marcello Vitale walked beside me without guards crowding his shoulders. Leo ran ahead with Rocket in both hands, then stopped and turned back. "Papa," he called. Marcello froze. Leo grinned. "Smile practice." Marcello knelt in the middle of the corridor, exactly where he had knelt before he knew the truth. This time he knew. This time Leo knew. This time I didn't walk in too late. Marcello smiled. Leo studied him seriously. "Better," he said. "Still a little scary, but better." Marcello looked at me then, not as a boss, not as a man asking for forgiveness he hadn't earned yet, just as the father of my son and the husband I had lost to a lie. He held out his hand. He didn't pull. He didn't demand. He only waited. For almost 7 years I had survived by running. That morning I stayed. I placed my hand in his. Almost 7 years ago, Marcello Vitale was made to mourn a child who had never died. But the boy in front of him had not only survived. He had taught his father how to love without owning, protect without controlling, and become human again.